Hi, I'm Michael Druckman, founder and managing director at Trident, and welcome to another Trident Talks. I'm pleased to be joined once again by our partners at GOLAW Law Firm and with Oleksandr Melnyk, partner and head of corporate transactions and mergers and acquisitions with GOLAW. Today, we'll be discussing further the issue of subsoil investments in Ukraine, particularly brownfield investments, a legal reality check. So let's dive right in then in this issue of brownfield investments, something that we know is something that is being actively looked at as a priority to generate, let's say, some of the first large international transactions in Ukraine to take advantage of what's already been done by Ukrainian partners before we move into, let's say, newer exploratory projects. But from your perspective, why are investors right now preferring some of the brownfield mining and processing assets in Ukraine over future greenfield projects? What opportunities are available in this area right now?
Okay, so I will start with why investors choose. I think that it's not just trend now, but it was a general trend from the very beginning of Ukraine 35 years ago. In general, I think that investors prefer brownfield in Ukraine because it's already some kind of de-risked on two hardest tracks. It's time and permitting history. So with an operating or previously operating asset, you usually have proven geology, existing infrastructure, maybe even trained workforce or shortened path for cash flow. And it also, of course, more bankable from the perspective of lenders because lenders and strategic partners they actually can assess the historical performance and not just model. And in practice, brownfield often means that you can focus your capital not on permitting and something like this, but by removing bottlenecks, processing upgrades, ESG compliance, and so on. And also it is because, again, of opportunities. So Ukraine, as post-Soviet country, got very good heritage of different industrial facilities and subsoil use and minerals extraction facilities are also in place. And Ukraine offers practically a lot of different brownfield opportunities now. First track, which is used by investors, including foreign investors, is privatization. So, as an example, in 2024, a United Mining chemical company was privatized. It is Ukraine's largest producer of titanium ore. Concentrates includes several deposits, and the privatization was the price of privatization was roughly 4 billion hryvnias. Another example is what is being now prepared for privatization is Demurinsky mining and processing plant, which is being prepared for privatization, and currently State Property Fund already made a decision on the privatization, so it's the matter of time. So basically, you can privatize the asset and develop it. Another one, it is conclusion of product sharing agreements. This mechanism gives investor a long-term access to subsoil blocks with cost recovery and profit sharing structures. As of 2024, for example, two PSAs were actively implemented for the Ukhnivska block and Ivanivska block. One was developed by foreign investor and one by Ukrainian. It should be noted that currently, by 2026, Ukraine selected first ever winner of lithium product sharing agreement tender for Dobra lithium block. And this project is very prominent as prescribes investment of almost $180 million. And the winner is a Dobra Lithium joint venture, which is also backed by foreign investors.
And Alexander, are
Another,
these, sorry to interrupt, but are
yeah,
these projects then and these announcements of these tenders and the sites that you've been mentioning, these are all publicly available.
it's
These aren't
publicly
hidden.
available and
Yeah.
it was already happened. So I just want like to show the success story.
Yeah.
So here we have another projects which are on the table and can be developed.
Hmm.
So, and I wanted to tell about it. So it's another track. You can co-invest with major domestic players. For example, we have state-owned company Ukernafta. Ukernafta is one of the biggest oil and gas producers in Ukraine, and they have been running tenders to attract co-investors under product sharing agreement scheme across multiple fields. It's roughly 21 field in Ukraine on the different stage of development. One already have geological surveys and some exploration, another only on the starting point. So having Ukernafta as a local player, you will be able to, I believe, succeed more in investment. So that is why I think that investors why prefer these brownfield projects because we have them and they shorten the term for cash flow.
Always a good thing. It's looking at some of the legal issues around this, from your perspective, which legal issues are most often underestimated by investors when they're entering Ukraine market, when they're considering the Ukraine market? What are those regulations that they should be actually thinking about that make the most impact, whether that's licenses, the subsoil rights, uh, the geological survey data, who's got the right maps, local stakeholder obligations, what are the obligations of international investors? Land rights are always extremely complex and have
Yeah.
evolved over the last decade in Ukraine. Maybe you could speak a bit to what, in your opinion, are the most overlooked of those.
I wouldn't say that investors in this particular area they're overlooking something. They are always very cautious because the amount of investments are always substantial.
Hmm.
Uh, but what we need to consider always, again, it's subsoil permits and licenses. So investors doesn't need to assume that you purchase, for example, a company with a license and you own it for eternity. No. In practice, it is conditional a work program compliance and it can be restricted or for example, for transfer or assignment. So you need to consider that you cannot sell it in some cases, or you need to understand that some history of pre-ownership may cause loss of the license. So you need to check on this. But legal due diligence shall disclose this issue. Also, land access and interfaces. So it's not only about title to the land plot, but also access roads, which require some tie servitudes, which means the right of use of another land plot.
Hmm.
You need to understand buffer zones, a right to adjacent plots, and so on. If you're looking for privatization, again, title check and previous or the legacy transactions shall be checked because in privatization cases, unfortunately, there are a lot of manipulations and state, sometimes prosecutors, they are trying to collect the privatized assets back, telling that you have some violations. And of course, to consider local stakeholders and environmental obligations, because, for example, environmental impact assessment as a compulsory stage of each of these projects usually have a strict plan of how you should act within certain period of time, and you need to adhere it. Otherwise, you will lose the right to, for example, for extraction, which is critical, I believe.
Absolutely. I think that issue of prior land ownership, prior transaction history is incredibly important because, as you're pointing out, that there have been criminal cases in the past related to previous owners that could absolutely jeopardize incoming investors not being
Yep.
aware of that history and the complex nature of some of those previous privatization efforts that have been attempted by previous Ukrainian governments. So
Correct.
absolutely,
Correct.
that's a great thing you're pointing out that I think is certainly overlooked when you're looking at something that seems new and is being billed as a new privatization when in fact it's an asset that may have been resold several times over. Um,
Yes.
are there
Yes.
any lessons that can be drawn from recent privatizations in terms of investor risk and opportunity?
Yeah. So, in terms of risk and opportunity, let's start with risk, I believe. So, for example, there was a case recently in 2025, one of privatization which led to litigation. So imagine that so it was a company, Georgian Industrial Group. They bought an asset for the price 800 million hryvnias with a bid security deposit of roughly $500,000, and they were disqualified by state property fund because they saw some kind of ties in their structure with Russia or Belarus, although it was not confirmed. So it led now to uh, dispute, and this resolved in court, but it shows the importance of how the preparation shall be done thoroughly from the legal perspective, because in such cases as privatization, everything needs to be perfect,
Mhm.
because always the decision will be challenged. It's also interesting that not only state property fund can challenge your ownership to privatized asset, but practically, according to our court practice and Supreme Court rulings, practically any person can submit a lawsuit against the winner of a privatized asset, challenging legitimacy for the purchase. But of course, again, advantages of privatization is ready-made infrastructure and established asset. So purchasing privatized asset allows an investor to enter into market quickly. So you have everything you need, from land plot equipment to grid connection. Uh, Also, you can buy this kind of asset relatively cheap. And currently, Ukraine introduced regulation which unblocked the possibility to privatize assets which located close to borderline,
Mhm.
to front line,
Frontline.
sorry. So it's around 300 small scale privatization assets which are available for privatization.
Over 300 right now.
300, yeah.
No. Well, I think another point there. You going back to your example about the case that's currently in litigation related to politically exposed persons, sanctioned countries, sanctioned entities. I mean, this is another area that, and it doesn't necessarily have to involve only Russian or Belarusian entities. So that these are things that absolutely. Investors could find entanglements on the ground already from previous investors or previous privatizations involving sanctioned entities from other countries as well.
Yep.
What should the early legal due diligence process cover to mitigate potential risks? We've talked a little bit about licenses, land rights, environmental rights, but what in your practice, in your particular practice that you're heading up at GOLAW, what are some of those early legal due diligence tools that should be utilized?
Well, if we speak about early legal due diligence, the main task here is just to understand for you go or no go, whether it is worth spending money for the project or not. So basically, I would say that you need to focus on permits, land, environment, and stakeholders.
Hmm.
License and permitting the most important thing here. Land and infrastructure, you need to understand how the title is clean or not, whether you will be able to access your land plot, and so on. Environmental obligations can the same importance as the licensing in general, and local stakeholders. Again, you will need to deal with local authorities, so mind what commitments you will have before the municipality, because sometimes these promises which made, for example, by developer, they will further affect your capex. It need to be considered. So basically, early due diligence must confirm that permits can legally survive the deal, that site is controllable, environmental liabilities are adequate, and community and regulator commitments won't prevent you from operational closing.
Yeah, we've had previous discussions with partners of ours about those community obligations and community engagement, local governance engagement. Obviously, that's just one piece of the puzzle, but it's a critical one for successfully implementing your project. Once you've received those licenses, you've had a clean asset acquisition or privatization from Kyiv. This is going to be this project. We talked about a few of them at the beginning of this discussion. They're taking place in communities all across Ukraine, whether near the front line or in Western Ukraine in the mountains. So that's a critical piece of the puzzle that you also mentioned. Maybe we could finish with just your thoughts on, again, sort of the legal risk mitigation tools. What are the most effective for brownfield investments? Bringing it back to specifically brownfield investments. What in your mind is the most effective tool?
Well, in order to mitigate risk, you need to be aware of what risk exists. Basically, deep due diligence and legal and technical will give you understanding how to act further. While once you have due diligence, you can cover some of the risk in transactional documents, for example, by conditions precedent to closing, for example, re-registration, some licenses reissuance, clearance of property, and so on. Then, if we see that some of the risk cannot be mitigated, the agreement shall include warranties and indemnity clause. So basically having a possibility to get some compensation for risk which cannot be
Covered.
lifted.
Yeah.
You can use escrow, retention, holdback mechanism, think about termination rights. Of course, use insurance where available. If the transaction involves some financing or you finance somebody, of course, think about proper security, and you should consider the Ukrainian rules for security is a little bit different from what works in US or other countries.
Sure.
And you shall have a post-closing compliance plan on how you will report on licensing, what are your environmental impact assessment obligations, and what controls do you have, and stakeholder engagement, how it should look like. So I believe that it's, of course, not full list, but
Sure.
at least essentials what you need to look at.
Yeah, absolutely. Critical starting point. Well, Alexander, thank you so much for your time on this topic today. We look forward to welcoming you back to discuss other areas that are important for international investors, particularly those looking at Ukraine right now to consider and the steps they can take right now, whether they're ready to invest in Ukraine or they want to be a part of Ukraine's economic recovery and success in the future. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Michael. I believe again that today is the moment for investment, and foreign investors need to be less cautious in terms of investing in Ukraine now, because it's the opportunities which will close. And I was happy to share my thoughts, and also will be happy to respond to any questions if the audience will comment here under this video. Be sure that we will react.
Absolutely. And we hope they do. All the best, Alexander. Until the next
Thank
time.
you. Stay
Bye-bye.
safe. Goodbye.